Hey there, it's Lara here. Welcome to your weekly astrology forecast. This one is for the week of September 8th to the 14th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So, I'm in a different location recording for you today. Um, Finally, kids are back in school. Although one is home today because he had some appointments, but he's been sworn to silence in another room right now. And I'm trying to get this done before the other two come home. So I should be recording in this space a little more regularly moving forward. So, because this is where my office is set up now, over on that side of the room. Anyway, and I should, on that note, be able to get my website up sooner than later. Now that the school routine is back on, and I have some quiet working hours during the day for a little while. Fingers crossed that all goes well. So here we are on Wednesday, September 8th, and we've got the moon in Libra, which is, moon in Libra is like a catchphrase we think of with moon in Libra is sort of emotional balance. Moon in Libra is measured usually with their emotional responses, but at times, you know, like I always say with Libra, the job of Libra's sort of natural role is to return things to balance, right? So sometimes that means that the pendulum swings, right, one way or the other, and then we have to restore it to balance. So it doesn't mean that everybody with moon in Libra is always calm and collected, sort of thing, but generally, we can kind of think of that sort of measured diplomatic approach with moon in Libra. So we've got that going on, and we have the moon moving into Scorpio on Friday, which is quite the contrary in many ways, right? Moon in Scorpio is, the moon is in her fall in Scorpio. And this means she's not comfortable there. She's sort of far away from her natural habitat. And so that can be uncomfortable and tricky and intense. I have natal moon in Scorpio, so this is energy that is familiar, right, to me. So that's going on throughout the weekend until Sunday, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, and then finally into Capricorn on Tuesday. So that's where the moon is at. And if you want my free guide to working with the moon, you can get that over on my, it's a landing page for my website right now, astrologymaven.com. And when you go there, you can just put in your first name and your email address, and you'll get the downloads. There's an audio and a PDF that goes with that. So you can grab that if you haven't yet. One of the things that's happening today is that Mercury, who is also in Libra right now, is opposing Chiron in Aries, right? Libra and Aries are opposite signs. If you see me looking down over here, it's because that's where I have my laptop today. So I'm just taking a look at my notes for the details. And Aries, Libra are opposite signs. They're sort of, the signs of the self, I, me, mine, my needs, what I want, what I'm, what I desire, that kind of thing, as opposed to the other, right? That's Libra, is the other. It's taking the other into account, sort of thing. Seeing both sides rather than just kind of what I want, sort of thing. And then there's Chiron, which is, as we know, moving through Aries for another, I can't remember exactly the date that Chiron leaves Aries, but it's another 3 or 4 years that Chiron is in Aries. And Chiron is making this journey through Aries. Sorry, I have a hair in my eye. And as it transits Aries, it is stirring some things up for all of us that have to do with the healing of our identity in some way, right? Who are we? Like it's all of us kind of getting this crash course and figuring out who we authentically are, and what, like, do we have the right to take up space, and what are our kind of needs, and that whole notion of, you know, Aries and the self kind of thing. And Chiron is associated with healing. So today, you know, and of course, nothing happens at just necessarily one moment in time. This is, as we always talk about with any kind of aspect, you know, they wax and wane, kind of like a moon cycle, right? So we may feel the energies leading up, and even as the exact aspect starts to pass. So the idea here is healing messages, potentially, Chiron with Mercury, right? And communications, or maybe differences of opinion, because this is an opposition. So it's two planetary bodies facing off, you know, going face to face. There may need to be some kind of compromise there, working things out. So there can be some kind of like difference of opinion potentially that may lead to healing on some level. So, you know, that's what's going on today as we speak. And then one of the things that I want to spend, or the thing I want to spend the most time talking about in today's video, is that Venus is entering Scorpio on September 10th. So a couple days time, right? That's happening on Friday. And this is an interesting move that we will probably notice, because right now Venus is traveling through one of her domiciles. Venus is moving through Libra, where Venus is at home and comfortable and can more easily and more readily do Venusian things, right? Take care of Venus's business, which is the business of relationships and love and beauty and aesthetic and, you know, even things like our resources and getting our needs met, pleasantries, you know, pleasures in life, all of that, our resources. I think I said that already. But yeah, so that's what Venus signifies. And in Libra, Venus has an easier time sort of dealing with those matters. But in Scorpio, not necessarily so much. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that, and why this is you know, a significant sort of something. It's something to pay attention to. I'm going to explain why that is. So it's interesting. Also interesting to know, you know, we're just talking about where the moon is at, and Venus is entering Scorpio as on the same day as the moon enters Scorpio for a couple of days. So kind of amplifying that. It's a sit up and notice the shift in energy kind of thing, right? So we're going to talk about that in more detail, but one other thing I want to mention to you before I get there is that on Tuesday, the 14th, so just before I record next week's video, right, because these videos go Wednesday to Wednesday, that's how I do them, but on Tuesday the 14th, we have the sun still in Virgo at that time, opposing Neptune in Pisces. So, and that's at 21 degrees Virgo specifically. So if you have planetary bodies, you know, if you have planets or points like angles, your ascendant, your descendant, your MC, your IC at around 21 degrees of Virgo Pisces axis, you're likely to kind of feel this more personally or potently, right? And what can that be about? Well, we talked about these oppositions to Neptune a few weeks ago in a video, because as I recall, I think it was Mercury that initially opposed Neptune, right? And all the planets that were moving through Virgo, because we're in Virgo season, the sun had its, or not the sun, but Venus had Venus's turn to oppose Neptune, right? Like any planet that was moving through Virgo had a turn, sort of thing, to oppose Neptune. So now it's the sun's turn. And what can this bring about? Just to review a little bit. Well, there can be a sort of lack of clarity. Neptune can bring about a lack of clarity, a sense of sort of fogginess or confusion, or not quite, like uncertainty almost, you know, in the sense that like Neptune makes things hard to pin down. Neptune brings about an energy of sort of elusiveness. It can also bring about things like deception and, you know, things seeming too good to be true, looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. Neptune can signify sort of martyrdom, escapism, whether that be healthy or unhealthy escapism, fantasy, dreams, imagination, all of that. But and then there's the sun, which is like the central organizing principle, right? Which is a phrase I borrow from Demetra George. And the sun is it's the light that gives, it's this life-giving force, right? And that's what it symbolizes. It's kind of like our some people use the word ego like to signify what the sun is about. The sun can signify leaders, the father sometimes, in some schools of thought. So this can be lack of clarity about the self, or about one of those other, or about a solar figure in some way, shape, or form. It can be this energy that also draws us in. It's kind of magnetic, right? The Sun Neptune is kind of a bit of a magnetic combination. But there's also, like I said, potentially this sort of muddled side, this elusive or deceptive side. Like you can't, like Sun Neptune people that have this aspect in their chart, Sun opposite Neptune, it's, when I was contemplating this, like it's almost like you can't quite tell if they're for real. It's almost like they're playing themselves in a movie in a weird sort of way. And I don't like, I don't know if that's coming across, but to give you some examples, there's a few people that I took a look at who have this aspect in their chart, right? A few well-known people. So Kanye West is somebody that, my kid is a big fan of him, of his music, but yeah, like he's this figure that is, you're not quite sure if his antics are for real or if they're put on. He's quite a solar figure, meaning like he's quite, he's quite popular. He's a musician. Sun Neptune can often signify that sort of, artistic quality, or musicians have these kinds of aspects often, but it's just like he's hard to pin down, right? And that also goes for a few other people who have this aspect. Elizabeth Taylor, right? She had these like violet eyes. She was, a Hollywood starlet, had been married many times, several times to the same guy. And, she was magnetic, but elusive, right? And then there's also Johnny Cash, the Man in Black, right? He has quite an interesting story, if you know it. Again, a musician, but mysterious and kind of hard to put your finger on, right? Russell Brand, who, the guy was an addict. He used to be really zany. He still is kind of zany, but he got clean, and now he's very spiritual. And if you're familiar with him, that he can be quite controversial, but he's generally like, he's kind of likable, but sometimes you're not really sure if you necessarily know why, or if you kind of like agree with him or don't agree with him. It's yeah, he's hard to pin down too. And then one last example I wanted to give you is to illustrate like how literal the astrology can be sometimes. I don't know if you are familiar with, or you remember, the crocodile hunter guys, Steve Irwin, right? He was Australian. I think he was from Australia, not New Zealand, but he had that thick accent, and he was such an interesting character. And his daughter, whose name is Bindi Sue, she has Sun opposite Neptune. And so if you remember, I was saying Sun can be about the father or a solar figure, right? Neptune is god of the sea. Well, and he has this, the symbol for Neptune is the trident, right? And so if you recall how Steve Irwin died, it was in this weird fluke accident with a stingray. He got jabbed. And I think of like the stingray tail as almost being like the trident of Neptune. And that's how Bindi Sue, who has this aspect, lost her father. So I'm getting goosebumps when I talk about this because sometimes it's just so wild how literal it is. And I wanted to share that with you to give you an example. So, I mean, that certainly doesn't mean that everybody with Sun opposite Neptune is going to have that kind of a, you know, a happening in their life, but it was a good example to give. So what I really want to spend, well, let's just wrap that little piece up. So as early next week, as we have the Sun opposite Neptune, just be mindful that it may be a time when, you know, if this is hitting your chart and particularly strong, then you might feel tired. You might feel lethargic. Neptune can kind of zap that life force of the Sun a little bit. There may be some confusing dynamics between solar figures or with solar figures or in relation to those kinds of solar figures. Things may be a little bit, you know, lacking in clarity and hard to pin down. But on the flip side, it can be really good for things like, you know, some sort of spiritual practice or some sort of, you know, kind of just healthy escape kind of thing in some way as well. So, or doing something creative, that sort of thing. It's a phrase that just came to mind when I'm thinking of Sun opposite Neptune is this idea of sort of creative tension, right? That could have some really sort of magical results in some way. So, okay, that's Sun opposite Neptune. What I want to spend the rest of the time talking about, and today's video, although I shouldn't even say this because every time I say it, it's not true, that I'm working on it being a little bit shorter, just, yeah, time-wise, and because this is a topic where we may not have to spend as much time, but we've got all the planets, or as the planets transit Scorpio, which is coming, right? I'm giving you a heads up about this. We've got Venus leaving Libra, like I said, and entering Scorpio on Friday. So Venus is leading the charge here in this case, right? So as, you know, Venus leads the charge, and then the other planets, as we move more into Scorpio season, in sort of, you know, moving into kind of October, early November, even late September, as the planets gradually start to move into Scorpio and transit through Scorpio, we've got, and this is going actually, so it starts now, so almost mid-September, right, as Venus moves in. And then I think the last planet, like, this isn't really going to be over until mid-December-ish. We're going to have Venus, the moon, obviously, moving through Scorpio, the sun, Mars, and eventually Mercury. Mercury is the last one because Mercury is going to retrograde in Libra and spend an extended stay in Libra, right? We mentioned that before, and we'll talk about it again in the near future. But as each of these planets moves through Scorpio, they are each going to oppose Uranus and Taurus, and square Saturn and Jupiter that are both in Aquarius. And we know that Uranus and Taurus and Saturn in Aquarius are squaring off over the course of 2021 and into the early part of 2022. So, and this is the signature energy, right, for this year, is this tension of the Saturn-Uranus square. And so, as all these planets move through the fixed water sign of Scorpio, they are hitting planets in the other fixed signs, right? And the other fixed signs are Taurus, where Uranus is, Leo, where we don't have anything really going on, but if you harken back to Leo season, when the planets all moved through Leo, they squared the planets in Taurus and Aquarius. as well, or sorry, Taurus and Scorpio as well at that time, right? So from a different angle at that point, but it happened then too. So we've got these fixed energies. So I already said Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius. And there is, this is intense. Let's just put it that way. This is intense, right? Like the key word for Scorpio is intensity. And so when we've got all these squares happening, that amplifies the tension and the intensity and the friction sort of thing. So, you know, just heads up about that kind of thing. Leading up to that, you know, we've had this lovely new moon in Virgo. We've got a lot of trines going on, sort of giving us a bit of a boost until then. And it's not to say that it's all bad. Like, I don't mean it like that. And intensity, you know, we kind of when we think of intensity, most of us, I think of that as something that maybe isn't desirable. But I'm not sure that that's true, right? I think some things lend well to intensity. I think intensity is necessary and even desired in some way. So it's not to say that this is going to be all bad. I don't want to freak you out like that. But it's like I said, it's sit up and take notice energy, right? So the other thing I want to mention, sort of in relation to this, is that around that same time frame, particularly kind of early to mid-October, we will have, so between October 6th and the 18th, we will have 4 planets stationing direct. So that is like this, like, if you think, like, I don't know if you've ever seen a horse race or seen it on TV, where, you know, the horses are kind of ready, and then like the gates go up and they just come right out of the gates, flying out of the gates. It's in some ways like that, although it takes a while for the energy to like gain momentum, right? So, and what happens when planets are stationing, either stationing to move retrograde or stationing to move direct, is that their energies are amplified. We notice them more. And so they are more kind of obvious. And so between October 6th and October 18th, we have 4 planets stationing direct. So we have Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury that will all move from retrograde motion to direct motion. So, you know, bringing this sense of like forward momentum, kind of, an amplification in the days around the stations specifically, that will make us kind of very aware of those planetary energies. So that's a lot of planetary movement in a short amount of time, right? So, you know, it's leading into Scorpio season. Scorpio is intense, right? So we shouldn't be surprised. I want to show you the chart briefly before I talk a little bit further about this, and before I kind of take you through the signs. So here's the chart where we have, I cast this chart for the moment that Venus enters Scorpio, which is on September 10th at 4:39 p.m. Eastern time, right? So Venus just at 0 degrees Scorpio. And notice that the moon is right there beside Venus, because the moon will be entering Scorpio shortly before Venus, as we talked about on Friday. So there we've got Mercury in Libra, right? Talked about that. Mercury's going to go retrograde in Libra. We have the Sun and Mars still in Virgo there, but eventually they're going to move on and enter Scorpio as well. And then they're going to, like I said, all those planets are going to square the other planets that are in the fixed signs: Uranus and Taurus, Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. So, and then I'll just point out to you, there's Neptune in Pisces, right? Which will be coming into an opposition with the Sun there. So, okay. So that's the chart. And I just want to say that anyone with planets in Scorpio or the other fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, when these planets, beginning with Venus, start to transit Scorpio, you're going to have either conjunctions, oppositions, or squares to those natal planets, right? And it's very dynamic energy, but it can also be tense energy. With these kinds of aspects, there tends to be a need for action, especially with squares, to work through the friction or the tension, or patience to, come to some kind of compromise and balance when we're talking about oppositions. And when we're talking about conjunctions, it's like a blending of the energies, right? So things can get a bit conflated and muddled, sort of thing, with conjunctions. But the planets can also support each other in a sense, where it's like, they can, like, for example, if you have a benefic like Venus or Jupiter conjunct a malefic like Saturn or Mars, then they can kind of, like, those benefic planets can kind of tone down the malefics, right? The energy of the malefics a little bit. They can give a bit of a buffer there as well. So they can, help each other out in that way. So, but I want you to be sort of aware of that there may be some intensity if you're somebody that has a lot of energy in the fixed signs. That happens to be my husband, who has a big old cluster of planets in Scorpio. I have my eye on that period of time, actually. So there may, like I said, there may be a need for some patience, or there may be a need for a lot of activity or action, or working out some tension or some friction. But the good news is with those kind of aspects, right, particularly when we're talking squares, there can be a lot of, or oppositions even, there can be rewards that come about through working intentionally through that energy and through those tense moments or the conflicts or that kind of thing. So the more aware and conscious we are of these things, the better we can, more consciously work with that energy, and the likelihood of things turning out more in our favor, I guess, let's put it that way, the likelihood of that is better, sort of thing. Next, I want to just address quickly anybody that has planets in Cancer or in Pisces. As all these planets transit Scorpio, you will have trines to those natal planets that are in Cancer or Pisces. And so this is helpful because it is, trines are when the planets involved are harmonizing, right? The energies are flowing harmoniously and easy. And, people that have trines in their birth chart, particularly like if you're somebody that has a grand trine, for example, which makes this triangle, like you've got planets, say, in all three water signs that are trining each other. Like, say you had something at a specific degree of Pisces, say, like, I don't know, 21 Pisces, and then something at 21 Cancer, and something at 21, give or take a few degrees on either side, of Scorpio. You have a grand water trine, which makes you have a special gift or talent for things that would be signified by, the element of water. Maybe creativity, maybe emotional intelligence or awareness, these kinds of things, right? So anyway, if you have planets in Cancer or Pisces, you're going to have trines to those planets from the planets that are moving through Scorpio, the other water sign. So that can help ease the tension a little bit. And if you have planets in Capricorn or Virgo, which are two earth signs, then you will have sextiles to those natal planets from the planets moving through Scorpio, because Scorpio sextiles Capricorn and Virgo. And a sextile is another sort of more considered, a more positive aspect. And it tends to bring about, it's like a friendly aspect, if you will, and it can bring about opportunity. So, maybe opportunity in this case through the tension that's being worked out. So that's something to look for. So let's just talk a little bit about Scorpio and this placement, with Venus specifically. And then I'm going to take it through the houses and talk to you about Venus in Scorpio and where that's happening in your chart and where you might feel that energy the most in your life. So Scorpio is, we've already used the word intense about 500 times, but I'll use it again. Scorpio is intense. Some other keywords would be penetrating, would be magnetic, would be, Scorpio has depth and is very much about getting to the bottom of things. It's magnetic and mysterious. Not a fan. Scorpio, people with a lot of Scorpio energy they tend to not be fans of the superficial, right? In general. And Scorpio has this innate sense of the darker side of life. They're very aware of the darker side of life. And as a result of that, it can kind of go two ways, right? There can be this sense of nihilism, like nothing matters. I'm just going to do what I want. Nothing anybody does matters because we're all going to die anyway, sort of thing, right? It can be taken in that direction. Or, and I see this in some people with Scorpio energy that I know, they can have more of a reverence for life, an appreciation almost for life, because they know, that sort of like all this ends, or bad things can happen, or, so there can be this reverence and appreciation for the sacredness of life. And Scorpio season in the Northern Hemisphere, right, is that time where we get like the fall colors out there. They're just kind of like starting to die off, and compost back into the earth to bring about new life the following spring, which is, this idea of Scorpio being related to the concept of death and rebirth, of that cycle of transformation, transmutation, right? Alchemy, that kind of thing. And so, it's that image of the leaves dying and but knowing that that's a necessary part of the cycle. If that didn't happen, if some things didn't die and give their nutrients to the earth, then other things wouldn't grow, right? And we wouldn't have that cycle. So people that are really kind of conscious of their Scorpio energy can have more of a reverence for life, or this sense of sacredness and appreciation for, the cycles of life and that kind of thing. And I mentioned that Scorpio is a fixed water sign, right? So emotionally fixed in some ways. That can be like emotional fixation can happen. There can be a bit of like, sometimes Scorpio can be a bit obsessive about things, or like I said, emotionally fixated. There's a real emotional intensity. So I have Moon in Scorpio in my birth chart. The depth of feeling is, I've talked about this before, is very difficult to articulate. And it goes well beyond what probably most folks would think of as quote unquote normal, or like, it's just not an experience that everybody has. And so it can be very difficult to articulate, right? There can be this sense of kind of like, as a fixed sign, like hanging on. Um, People, like, if you are emotionally wounded, somebody hurts you emotionally, as a person with a lot of Scorpio energy, or moon in Scorpio, say, that is very difficult to let go of. Even though you may logically sometimes think like, oh my God, get over it. It doesn't work that way, right? It's like a somatic experience, that really, really like gets stuck there in the emotional body sort of thing, as a fixed water sign. And so, it can be hard to work through, and it can be quite intense. Scorpio is like, so like, as fixed water, it's like the murky waters that hold the secrets, right? The mysteries sort of thing. And in traditional astrology, Scorpio is ruled by the planet Mars, which also rules Aries, right? Mars is the co-ruler of Scorpio and of Aries in traditional astrology. One of the malefics, the malefic planets that's associated with, Mars was the god of war, but Mars can be the warrior. Mars is the planet associated with things like, battles and inflammation and instinct. It's a very instinctual planet, and I think that's one of the things to kind of emphasize here. Scorpio, is it's like, it's a very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Primal energy, which brings me to, in modern rulerships, we say that Pluto rules Scorpio, right? And again, I'll just, give you my stance. I've talked about this a little bit before, but if you're new here, I'm glad you're here, first of all. But, I originally started out studying evolutionary astrology, and I still have an appreciation for that, and some archetypal astrology and that kind of thing. I very much have an appreciation for that. But I, in more recent years, have studied traditional astrology and come to really have a major appreciation for that. And I really feel like the foundations, are what we really need to kind of hang on to, and they make sense once you start to learn about this. And so, all that to say, my approach now is that there is definitely room for both. I think there's a real, I think we're lucky we have both. And I think that we can use both approaches. But I think when we're talking about things like rulerships, for me at least, the traditional approach makes more logical sense, to me anyways. But I do believe that in this case, like I was saying, Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio. Pluto definitely has an affinity or a resonance with Scorpio. So it could, like, I would even consider it a co-ruler. And I came into evolutionary astrology through the door of Pluto, because I am somebody who has a lot of, I have a stellium in the 8th house. I have that Saturn-Venus conjunction I'm always maligning in the 8th house in Aries, right? A Mars-ruled sign. And I have Pluto in my first house. So anyway, I got a lot of Pluto energy in my chart, and I came through the door of Pluto. It really spoke to me. But then as I learned more about the traditional approach. I could start to see the sense in it. And I think we've just lost a lot. A lot has been lost in translation, so to speak, over the years. And I think we don't necessarily really understand the rationale. And I think once you start to understand the rationale of the traditional approach, you can see the value of it, right? Anyway, that was a bit of a soapbox tangent, but all of that to say, Scorpio, ruled by Mars, strong affinity with Pluto, or co-ruled by Pluto, if you will. And, Pluto is the god of the underworld, right? Hades. It doesn't get much more intense or darker or deeper than that. And so, Mars, god of war, Pluto, god of the underworld, co-rule the sign of Scorpio. That's all you really need to know. Anyway, the moon, as I was just talking to you about the moon, and my moon in Scorpio, the moon is considered in its fall in Scorpio, right? And I mentioned that earlier. And Venus is in detriment in Scorpio. So, meaning that Venus is not comfortable in Scorpio. When a planet is in detriment, it's like it feels out of place. Like I don't belong here. This isn't my vibe, right? This isn't the vibe I resonate with. It's like, if you're, I don't know, let me think about this. If you're somebody who's, really sort of, let's say like kind of like, and I'm using like caricatures sort of thing, right? But like picture like, I don't know, nobody's coming to mind right now, but like, and I'm dating myself here big time. The first character that comes to mind is Laura Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie. I don't know why. Anyway, picture Laura Ingalls walking into a party of like goths. She might feel pretty out of place. That's kind of Venus in Scorpio in a weird kind of way. Or, I don't know. I'm sure you can think of a million other way better examples than that. But the point is Venus is not comfortable in Scorpio. Venus feels like she can't really be full on Venus, right? She can't be true to nature in Scorpio. She's getting like the side eye, and she's getting, things are being kind of like made sort of difficult for her to do her job in Scorpio. And I don't mean, sometimes I use the pronouns she and her and he and him to reference the planets. And if that offends anybody, I apologize for that. Sometimes it just comes out, but I am conscious of it. And like, I mean that in sort of like this yin yang kind of way, right? This sort of more kind of like, masculine and feminine way, but not in a binary way kind of thing. So I hope you understand that, that's how I'm using those words. And so, I was talking about Venus being in detriment and, so being quite uncomfortable in Scorpio. And in fact, no planets are exalted in Scorpio. There are other signs that no planets are exalted in, but Scorpio, Moon is in fall in Scorpio, Venus is in detriment. No other planets are exalted or held up or revered in Scorpio. And Scorpio is like, yeah, that's the way it is, I guess, kind of thing, right? Scorpio is kind of used to maybe kind of being a little bit on the fringes, or like I said, dealing with the darker side of life and that sort of thing. So, what else do I want to say to you about that? I think I want to emphasize that point of, having reverence for life and the natural sort of cycles and appreciation for that. Again, and the beauty in that, right? The beauty in that sort of mystical, magical process. Which reminds me, if you've never seen the movie Fantastic Fungi on Netflix, it is fascinating and well worth the watch. And it really makes me think of Venus and Scorpio. It makes me think of Scorpio in general, but it definitely makes me think of Venus and Scorpio. You know, it's all about mushrooms and how they are, like, they're so fascinating, and they're kind of like foundational to life on Earth and this process of regeneration, and so many things, right? They're so helpful for so many things and so valuable. But we don't necessarily really kind of notice them, or we don't look at them as necessarily beautiful or anything like that. But anyways, really good show. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. So as Venus moves through Scorpio, it's going to transit a specific house for each of us. And so we may notice that Venusian themes, particularly as filtered through the lens of that particular house that it's moving through, may be a little bit more prickly, a little bit more difficult to manage, a little less light and, warm and fuzzy kind of thing. So, but what I want you to kind of try to think about and focus on as Venus transits Scorpio is, that whole notion of reverence for life in every stage, and the sacredness of life. Because when we acknowledge that, this all ends, we're more likely to take the moment that we're in, not take the moment that we're in for granted, right? And we're more likely to appreciate it. Now, but with a depth, right? With a depth of Scorpio, not to appreciate it like those people. Sorry if I'm going to offend anybody right now, but those people who are like, can we all just get along? Can we all just get along? Like, that doesn't really matter. We can't, like, do we have to argue about that? And sometimes it's about something that's really necessary to acknowledge and to discuss and to uncover and, get to the bottom of, or those conversations that are, a little bit more difficult, that are, necessary, and that kind of thing. And so in some, a lot of times people are like, I just want to, like, enjoy life. I just want to appreciate, but they mean it in a way like, I don't want to have to deal with the ugly stuff and the difficult stuff and the prickly stuff and the conflict and the discomfort and all of that, right? That's not really having reverence for life. When you have reverence for life, that means the whole enchilada. And so when you're a person that has reverence for life, that, for example, climate catastrophe matters. That what's happening with abortion laws in Texas matter. That the opioid crisis and the homelessness crisis matters. So you're not afraid to face those things, and to maybe, take a stand, or engage somehow, or consider, your perspective, like, to get involved, or to, at very, very least, acknowledge that and not sweep those things up under the carpet. Scorpio does not sweep things under the carpet. Well, I'll circle back to that in a minute. But Scorpio is more about lifting up the carpet to see what's underneath it, right? That's more what Scorpio is about, and knows that like the house isn't really clean unless you've done that piece. Like if there's dirt under the carpet, there's still dirt. You know, now Scorpio can be like, it sort of depends on the individual horoscope, but you know, Scorpio can be associated with things like very intense like taboo subjects, right? So violence against women potentially, or you know, the Harvey Weinstein scandal, like is a little bit of a Venus Scorpio, you know, even Pluto dynamic, right? So there's that end of things, but Scorpio at its really, when it's true to form, is wanting to uncover the, like, what's at the bottom of the murky kind of, like I was saying, you know, lake or whatever, to dredge that up, and to purge it and to get rid of it, and to like look at it and go, this is something we can't ignore, right? And just, I guess I love talking about Scorpio, as you could probably tell. But anyway, just to leave you with like a final sort of thought before I take it through the signs, you know, is I always think of Scorpio like as being this Sherlock Holmes kind of character, right? Particularly, I think of like Benedict Cumberbatch. I don't know if you've seen that series, but or even the movies with Robert Downey Jr. But like I think of that Sherlock Holmes kind of character, and the getting to the depths of things, and to really kind of like, you know, uncovering the secrets and investigating and all of that sort of thing. So now that I've gone on a big long tangent about Scorpio, and honest to God, I could just go on and on and on, because it's well, I mean, I think you could probably almost sense that, like, it's almost like I'm channeling Scorpio, if you know what I mean, right? Not in a woo-woo kind of sense, but just like the intensity and the depth, like we could just go down the rabbit hole sort of thing. So that's Scorpio. And as I was saying, Venus moving into Scorpio is a real, on the positive end of things, I think is a time where we can really dig into our relationship to reverence for life, and we can really dig deeply into that, into the sort of darker corners, right? So as I was saying, Venus is transiting a specific house for you as she moves through Scorpio, and I'll just go back in my notes and give you those dates again. That is happening, so September 10th, Venus enters Scorpio, and through October 8th. So about a month, we've got this Venus and Scorpio energy going on. But when I'm giving you the house that Venus is transiting through Scorpio, keep in mind that the other planets will follow suit, right? Like I said. And so this area of your chart, or these life themes, are likely to be triggered during that time of sort of like mid to late September through to December sort of thing, as all the different planets move through Scorpio. So and triggering again that Saturn and Uranus, and also Jupiter's, you know, Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, and Uranus in Taurus, like we talked about earlier in the intro. All right, enough about all of that. Let's dig in here through the signs. And we're going to start with Scorpio because Scorpio, before I even say that, using whole sign houses here in case you're wondering, and also listen for your rising sign first and foremost. That is the most sort of accurate or obvious. Then you can listen for your sun sign, which may have more of a resonance with things like sort of career matters or public life. And then listen for your moon sign, which is, sort of on a more sort of internal or emotional level. But when you are listening for your rising sign in a general forecast like this, that's generally the way to go if you're going to listen to one thing, because it will most accurately reflect, the goings on sort of thing for each rising sign. So we're starting with Scorpio. So Scorpio, all of these planetary energies, beginning with Venus, are moving through your first house, right? Moving through your sign. And so if you're somebody that has a lot of planets in Scorpio, like my husband, or you're a Scorpio rising, then, as a Scorpio rising, you've got Venus and then the other planets eventually moving through your first house of self, of your physical being, your physical vitality, your life force, your kind of approach to the world, right? How you come at the world, the face you put forward to the world, and how the world perceives you. So the first house, I always say to you, when planets transit the first house, it's big. It's like the reset button is being hit in some way. It can kind of have an overall impact on our lives when things transit the first house. And with Venus moving through your first house, people that have Venus in the first house can often be perceived as quite beautiful or magnetic, or there's something, particularly if you're a Scorpio rising, and you've got Venus transiting there, it can make you a little bit more magnetic or a little bit more, mysterious, where people are like paying attention to you and wanting to kind of get to know you or curious about you, or, seeing you as quite like, beautiful, but maybe not in the traditional sense, right? So, and quite appealing. There's something appealing there. So Venus moving through Scorpio can have that impact for sure. It can also, it can be a time where things like that Venus signifies beauty, resources, relationship, particularly because this first house, which is opposite the seventh house of one-to-one relationships, right? So it can have an impact on those kinds of things, and it can feel a little bit more intense, and it can feel like maybe those things are taking a little bit more energy than they were when Venus was moving through Libra. It's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more, there may be some friction there that needs to be worked out. But intensity in relationship isn't always a bad thing, right? There can be sort of like intense physical attraction, which, isn't a bad thing for sure. I mean, we don't want to base long-term relationships on only that, but it can be an important part of it. So, those are some things that can be kind of stirred up. And for some reason, one of the things that comes to mind here when I'm thinking about this, and just based on what we were talking about earlier, is that, like, I can see this as a time for, if you're somebody like me who is aging, and you've got Venus moving through your first house, and you're going through some life changes, and your body's changing and aging, and your appearance is changing, and that kind of thing. You're getting older, and the signs of aging are getting more obvious. This can be a real time to kind of embrace that. For example, like a couple months ago, I finally decided, or a few months ago, I don't remember exactly when, but it's like, you know, the grays are here to stay. I'm not doing anything about them anymore. I'm embracing that kind of thing. So, you know, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's a good time to kind of see the beauty in that process, right? Of aging and what comes with that, even though it may not be what we consider or what our societal, you know, society dictates we should consider as beautiful. So that's one way I can see this energy working in somebody's life, you know, and I encourage you to work with it that way, if that happens to pertain to you. So this could be maybe, like, I think I've touched on this whole notion of intensity in relationship a little bit already. So be aware and be mindful of that, right? And if things are getting a little bit tense, if there's some friction there in relationship, or regarding resources, just be mindful of how you're approaching that. And no, you know, like, Venus isn't in Scorpio forever. It's only there for about a month. So this too shall pass. And then again, you know, this energy is triggering Uranus and Taurus, Saturn and Jupiter and Aquarius as well. So igniting that, or reigniting that energy of the Saturn-Uranus square that we've been dealing with all through this year. So that's nothing new, but it may be a point of inflammation, right? That's going on there for a while. So, okay, I think that, I mean, you may choose, I'm going to give you one more thing here, one more kind of thought or example. You may choose at this time to switch things up aesthetically. Do something to your appearance that may be perceived as a little bit more intense or mysterious. Like, you know, you're going to start dressing all in black, for example, or you're going to be, you know, maybe you're I don't know, like, you could even, like, I don't know what maybe you're going to buy a black vehicle, or you're going to, you know, something revolving around like aesthetic in your life, whether that be your space, your personal self, you may do something to kind of like beautify that, but in a, maybe not a, like in a traditional way, shall we say. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Scorpio. I'm going to move on. We're already an hour in, right? This is the way it goes. It's me and my tangents. We're going to move on to Libra now, where you've got Venus transiting your second house, Libra. So you've had Venus transiting your sign, which has been lovely. And Venus loves being at home in Libra. And she, you know, Venus feels very good and comfy in Libra. And then she moves into Scorpio, where not so much, as we talked about in the intro. And so things can be a little bit more difficult for Venus in Scorpio. And this happens to be your house of personal resources, of time, money, energy, you know, your personal finances, how you get your basic needs met, what you value, you know, your personal values and your sense of self-worth. And so as Venus moves through Scorpio, there can be maybe some intensity around issues of money and relationship, that can feel a bit, you know, prickly and difficult and need some patience, like I said, or maybe some taking of action to work through, like we talked about in the intro. This could be, I think of like forensic accounting when I think of Venus and Scorpio in the second house. So this could be a real, like, digging deep into like personal finances in some way. Like, it could be where you're really going over things, your finances, you know, and your resources. or even your values quite intensely. With maybe like a mind to balancing things out. So, you know, Venus is the ruler of your sign Libra, which is all about bringing about balance. And so, you know, that could be like the end game kind of thing, but it can feel a bit intense as you're going through that process. There could be something going on here, like I said, about relationship and money. So this could be like sort of, you know, what I mean, it is triggering the Uranus and Taurus piece that's across the sky there. So there could be something going on at this time that has to do with shared resources even. There could be yeah, like there could be like a working out sort of what's mine and what's yours almost. Or some you know, intense moments of difficult conversations around money or resources, you know, those kinds of things. But it can be a good time for appreciating the ebbs and flows that happen, you know, in relation to our personal finances and how we get our needs met. You know, it can be a time of even it could be even like you're spending resources on things that may be considered Scorpio like. A private investigator. I don't know. That's what came to mind. Or like some sort of therapy, like I was talking about, you know, somatic therapy or some kind of like a therapy that's kind of helping you get to the bottom of something, right? That sort of thing. So, okay, I think we've taken it in a few different directions there, Scorpio, and I'm going to leave it there for you, and I'm going to move on to Libra. So, Libra, you've got Venus transiting Scorpio through your second house. Nope, that was Libra. Sorry. Oop, I almost messed up again. I've already done Scorpio, and that was Libra, and now we're moving on to Virgo. Okay, sorry about that. So, Virgo, for you, you've got Venus transiting through your third house, which is where Scorpio is in your chart, right? And whole sign. And so, and as you know, then Venus is going to move through there, and then the other planets are all going to follow suit, and that's going to trigger that Saturn-Uranus square again and stir things up there. But Venus in Scorpio is like moving through the themes, the third house themes of siblings, your immediate environment and the people in it, which, you know, like I said, siblings, cousins, neighbors, peers, teammates, friends who feel like siblings. Third house is our communications. It is our commerce. It is things like marketing, you know, back and forth exchanges that happen. It is short commutes and short distance travel. It is schooling. You know, we're usually talking about sort of like at the earlier years up to high school or learning the basics. So these are all themes that can be triggered by Venus, and then eventually, like I said, the other planets moving through Scorpio, sort of mid-September through to December, right? And so Venus in Scorpio in your third house, this can be things like maybe some intense moments in relationships with siblings or with some of those other people that I mentioned, right? That the third house can signify. This can be having to maybe deal with some issues around resources and like technology. That can also be third house, or vehicles, anything with sort of moving parts, you know. There can be an expenditure that happens there that may feel like maybe not exactly how you're hoping to spend your money, but it can also, it can be on something like oh goodness, that allows you to take something to, like, deeper almost, you know. Buy a scuba diving outfit. Oh God, where my head is going today, I don't know. But you know, like or submarine. But you know, or there could be like there could be some, like I said, some tension over resources potentially with siblings, or there can be some and when we're talking about Venus, this could be like female siblings or female peers, or and you know, other people like that. This could be let me think here for a second. This could be some intense news even, or you know, that you're having to kind of deal with or work through, that may be involving like school, or or like some kind of communication issue that revolves around any kind of illusion theme, like resources, or relationships, or women, or beauty, or anything like that. Some intense communications could be happening around those themes. So I'm just thinking. Just give me a second to think here. So here's the thing, right? This is me. I'm a Virgo rising. I have Scorpio in the third house. And I can sort of like anticipate potentially what some of this may be about. But for me personally, but you know, that's not to say that everybody with Virgo rising is necessarily going to have that same experience. I can even think of one thing that came to mind, and again, this is like thinking about my own, what's going on and what I'm anticipating in my own experience. It's like I keep talking about my website, right? That I've got to get it done. Well, that's kind of like a third house thing. It is also a Venusian thing, because you know, you want to make it look nice, and that sort of thing. And so I can see some intense work on getting my website looking, you know, good enough, and having all the pieces in place to kind of put out there, right? So you can kind of see how all those things are fitting together there. So you think about your own sort of experience and the information that I've given you, and consider, you know, what could be going on for you. And I talked about, you know, the reverence for life piece there earlier in the intro. So have a think about that and how that could apply as well. All right, so I'm going to leave it there, Virgo. I'm going to move on to Leo now, where we've got Venus and then the other planets eventually moving through your fourth house, which is Scorpio for you as a Leo rising. And so, you know, that those fourth house themes will be triggered for you. They'll be more in your face, shall we say, during this time. And also that Saturn-Uranus square will be triggered, right? which we talked about in the intro. So what are fourth house themes? Well, the focus is on home, family, place of living, real estate, roots, nurturing sort of parental figures. Some say like the parents in general. You know, the legacy you have been left sort of thing is very fourth house. And so when we have a lot of activity in the fourth house, those themes tend to be triggered, right? And when you're talking about, in this case, Venus leading the pack, like I said, moving through Scorpio first, that can be some, that can indicate a lot of activity around relationships and resources in terms of home, family, all those fourth house themes that I just mentioned. There can be even, you know, expenditures on things around the home that may feel a little bit intense, or things, you know, like when I think of Scorpio and I think of like, well, sometimes like things like there could be like plumbing issues that have to be addressed. I'm not meaning to freak you out here. I'm just giving you one of many, many, many potentials. It could be things like, you know, female sort of ancestors, or females in the family group, that there's a lot going on around that. And it could be around, it could be intense because it is Scorpio. It could be around relationships with those people. It could be around resources involving those people. It could be again, take it in a totally different direction. I think of Venus in Scorpio in the fourth house. You're redecorating and you're going to paint your bedroom black, you know, or just more like the decor that you choose will have more of a sort of like an intense kind of an intensity to it, right? Like we're not talking about like pastels and flowers here necessarily. So that kind of a thing, that kind of an aesthetic potentially. You know, richer sort of colors, like the colors of fall, even I think of. Maybe you're busily, you know, decorating your house for fall and for the Halloween season or something like that. You know, that's like Venus and Scorpio in the fourth kind of thing. You're spending some money on that kind of stuff, maybe. So those are a few ideas. I'm trying to think of anything else. I don't know, like a key phrase, just like intense family sort of relationships kind of comes to mind. And again, intense experiences have their place, right? So let's remember that, and let's remember that whole, you know, tangent I went on about like having reverence for life and, you know, the natural processes and the cycles of life and that kind of thing that I talked about in the intro. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Leo. I'm going to move on to Cancer now. And Cancer, this is happening for you in the fifth house. So you've got Scorpio in your fifth house. And this, when the planets move through Scorpio, that's your fifth house. And that triggers themes of children, of how you have fun in life. You know, what sparks joy for you, what brings you pleasure, your sort of creative pursuits or creative self-expression, creative projects, that kind of thing. So, you know, this is a time when these things are generally tend to be stirred up, because every year the planets move through this area of the chart around the same time. But of course, we've got that Saturn-Uranus square to contend with, right? And this is going to intensify that for everybody. you included. So whatever that's been bringing about for you is likely to be triggered around this time. And I've done other videos on that that you can go back and listen to. So nevertheless, when we're talking about just Venus moving through this area of the chart, because that's what's happening initially, that's the first planet to move in to Scorpio. This can be things we can think about this as potentially like female or more like feminine children, for example. This can be mothering. This can be spending money on pleasure pursuits that may be a little bit like intense in some way, or have a depth to them in some way. This can be this can be your kid coming home with like a bunch of piercings. This can be you know, having to spend some resources on kids. That could be things like, even on things like again, some sort of like therapy potentially, or you know, kind of like investigating something. There could be some emotional intensity around kids, around again, like, you know, pleasure, having fun, around, you know, your creative life in some way as well. This could be even, well, I mean, it could be like spending money on, I already mentioned kids, but like on some kind of like creative pursuit that may have a bit of a Scorpio flair to it, right? I don't know, like I think of paintings that are there's this local artist, Mind Melt Studio, I believe he is, and he does these really kind of really interesting, sometimes like there's like a sense of like the macabre, which Scorpio can have, but like darker colors and like a little bit more sort of intensity in the art. So that could be something as well. All right, so I like to try to kind of hit it from as many different angles as I can, right? So I mean, some of these things to some of you may be like, what is she talking about? Or to some of you, you might be like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense to me in my particular situation, right? So, okay, so we're going to leave that there for you, Cancer. We're going to move on to Gemini now, where Gemini, you have Scorpio in the 6th house. So as Venus moves through Scorpio, and then followed by all the other planets that are going to move through Scorpio, as they do every year around the same time, but they are going to trigger that Saturn-Uranus square, right? And we talked about all this in the introduction. And so there's this element of like tension and intensity that may be outside of the norm, you know, because we don't always have the Saturn-Uranus square going on. Or Jupiter also in Aquarius. And so, you know, the planets will make a square to that as well. Or, you know, that Uranus and Taurus piece across the sky from all the planets that are moving in through Scorpio. So there's like this intensity here, right? And this has to do with 6th house themes for you of health and wellness, of, you know, your health routines, of the work you do on the day-to-day, of your daily grind, so to speak, how you are in service. Sometimes pets is a 6th house theme as well. And so this can be a time where, you know, there may be some generally, like Venus is a benefic planet, right? But in Scorpio, she's not so comfortable. But she can still bring some support for these things, these sixth house themes. But it could be, you know, issues around money and your daily work, or your health, or relationships, you know, as they connect with those six house themes. This is potentially women's health and wellness, issues around women's work, potentially. Um, you know, I mean, one of the things that just comes to mind is, like, again, I'll bring this up again, but like, you know, the abortion issue, right? That's right now we're seeing highlighted in Texas, for example, or the issue around what's going on with the Taliban in Afghanistan. And so, you know, this is women's, ultimately it has to do with women's health in many ways, right? So I can see those themes being triggered potentially, and those are intense. That's a like, they have the intensity of Scorpio, right? So that may be somehow a little bit personal for you around this time. It could be, so let's take it in a completely different direction. This can be like, I don't know, spending money on like pets, but I think of like Scorpio, like I'm thinking of things like reptiles, or you know, pets that may seem a little bit like not beautiful in the traditional sense, potentially, right? So Scorpio is associated with the reproductive system. And so I can see this even being like, that may be something that's being dealt with around this time. Like, if any health issues that may come up may have to do with something along those lines, potentially. Or there's like a getting to the bottom of things, if there has been things going on as far as that goes, you know, for you or people in your life. So that's one way of looking at it as well. It's There's also this notion of service in the sixth house, right? And so this brings to mind, like, maybe people that are working in those scenarios that I talked about earlier, which can be quite intense, right? But are somehow working to bring more justice there. You know, Venus can be associated with that as well. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there. You know, some weeks it's a little more difficult to kind of, even though I said this should be succinct at the beginning, and I went on a Scorpio tangent, but it's a little more difficult to kind of, to do this piece of it, particularly when I'm going through the signs. So like I said, I'm trying to hit as many bases as I can. We're going to move on to Taurus now, where we have Scorpio in your 7th house. And so at this time of year, we've got planets transiting, you know, starting to transit Scorpio. And in this case, beginning with Venus on September 10th. And, but the difference here is we've got the Saturn-Uranus square being triggered, you know, by the planets moving through Scorpio. And so that makes it extra, right? Extra intense. And so for you, the themes being triggered are relationships, by and large, right? The 7th house is the house of close personal relationships. So significant others, close friends and family members, business partnerships, even rivals, and contracts and agreements as 7th house as well. And so, you know, this can be a time when you've got Venus moving through there, like I can see this as some intensity in relationship. That's going on. I can see you could even sort of like meet somebody that, you know, there is like an intense sort of attraction, or there could be something involving like some kind of a relationship in your life that has this bit of a like a love-hate thing going on, or like an attraction repulsion kind of thing going on. Almost I can see that being a possibility. There could be this could be you spending money on other people, or on, you know, a relationship in some way, shape, or form. This could be intense contract negotiations going on. This could be um, okay, different idea altogether. Something that just popped into my head. This could be like, you know, you're in a bit of a rivalry, or you've got like a, you know, somebody you're in competition with, and Venus, which can be the seventh house, right? Venus moving through there can maybe soften the edges a little there. Or it can have you realizing that maybe somebody who you thought was your rival, maybe there's a bit of an attraction there potentially. Um, there could be it could be like a female rival even. You know, being Venus. So those are a few things for you to consider, and, you know, bring in that piece rather than me reiterating it all here. But that piece I talked about in the introduction, about this whole notion of like having a reverence for the sacredness, right, of life. And so, you know, listen to the intro and think about that when you're thinking about your seventh house and how all these planets, Venus initially, are going to be transiting there and maybe stirring up some intensity. So, okay, that's for you, Taurus. We're going to move on to Aries now, where Aries, you have Scorpio in your eighth house, right? Scorpio is also a Mars ruled sign, as you are. So you kind of have a familiarity with that Martian energy. And with Venus moving into your sign, where it's Venus is in its fall in Aries. But if you're an Aries rising, right, you've got Scorpio in the eighth house. And so Venus moving through the eighth house can really, and then followed by all the other planets, it's triggering the Saturn-Uranus square that we talked about. So some intensity there, definitely being triggered, right? Some tension, some friction, some need to work that out. But this can be like intense attraction, that can feel like very, very, like very potent, very primal almost, right? Which again, like I mentioned something about this in the intro, definitely has its place and its value, but it can't be what it's all about, sort of thing. But that's one possibility. This can be taken in a completely different direction. Working like in some kind of like depth therapy or something, psychological therapy with a female therapist, or around some issues around women, potentially women and children, you know, getting to the depths, getting to the bottom of things there. This can be other people's resources are being triggered very much, you know, your relationship to other people's resources. And when I say other people's resources, this can be things like insurance, debt, wills, loans, taxes, bursaries, scholarships, anything like that, right? So mortgages. So there can be some, a lot of activity going on around that, and some intensity, and some, again, like really getting to the bottom of things there, as far as those themes go, right? So, oh, there's so much more. I can always say so much more, but I beg of you to listen to the introduction, where I cover, you know, a lot, and I went down I went on a bit of a tangent about Scorpio and about this whole notion of the sacredness of life, or the reverence for life, right? And when we're talking about eighth house can be very associated with that cycle of death and rebirth. So it's prime time to be contemplating that, right? And the beauty in that, the inherent beauty in that. So, okay, so I'm going to leave that there for you, Aries. I'm going to move to Pisces now, where we have Venus transiting your ninth house, Scorpio, followed by, you know, the other planets that will all move through there during Scorpio season as well, as they do every year around this time. But the thing is, and I mean, of course, we haven't even officially like entered Libra season, because the sun is not quite out of Virgo yet, but this is what we have our eye on, and Venus is kind of like testing the waters at first, right? Going into Scorpio on September 10th. So she will be the initiator. And we do well to pay attention to what goes on around that time, because we got Venus moving in there, and also the moon in Scorpio over the weekend, like I mentioned in the intro. And so whatever transpires around this time can be a good indicator of sort of like what's in store for us as all these planets move through Scorpio, in your case, the ninth house, which stirs up themes of your perspective, your worldview, expanding your horizons in some way, you know, connecting with foreign people and places, travel potentially, what you learn from people who are different from you. Even things like, you know, publishing and academia, or higher learning in general, kind of thing. So all of these themes could potentially be triggered, right? And this can be things like, so with Venus in particular, we can be talking about things like spending money on a course of study, and it could be like feel quite like intense, or like there's a lot of like sort of studying going on, right? That is a very ninth house theme, to gain like knowledge and wisdom that feels quite intense, and like you're digging deep, and you may be, you know, spending some resources on that in some way. This could be this could revolve around like learning, like the learning environment somehow, or expanding your horizons somehow, that is connected to the idea of like the feminine, to women, to children, to beauty and aesthetic in some way, shape, or form, you know, to relationships. It could be so here's one weird thing that just popped into my head. When I think of Venus and Scorpio in the ninth house, I think about a trip that I took to Boston with my family several years ago, and we went to Salem, and we went to like, you know, we toured some different, like we did the Freedom Trail, and we toured some different, you know, graveyards, and we learned about the you know, the witch trials and things like that. It sounds kind of weird, but that is like a Venus and Scorpio in the ninth house experience. So that kind of gives you an idea of the vibe, right, that I'm talking about here. So I think that that gives you enough to go on, Pisces. You know, consider what's going on in your own life around those themes. Consider that there may be some intensity. There may be like some kind of a need to travel somewhere to spend some money on that, to like, that may feel a little bit like intense. I know I keep using that word, but it really is the best word. You know, something along those lines. And please keep in mind that idea that we spoke about earlier about this like having an appreciation for sort of like the reverence, right? Or having a reverence for life is what I'm trying to say here. Or the sacredness of life and the cycles, the natural cycles, right? So, okay, like a million examples are popping into my head right now. But you know, it's an hour and 40 minutes in here. So I'm going to leave that there for you. And I hope that gives you enough to go on. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius now. So Aquarius, for you, Scorpio season triggers your 10th house, right? And even though we're not specifically in Scorpio season, like I was saying to another sign a minute ago, the sun hasn't even entered Libra yet, let alone Scorpio. But Venus is leading the pack right now. And, you know, of those planets that travel close together, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and you know, the moon, of course, travels very quickly, so we'll trigger the spot as well. But, and eventually Mars. But there is this, this trigger of the Saturn-Uranus square that's happening at the same time that these planets are moving through Scorpio. And like I was saying, Venus is leading the pack. So giving us an initial kind of like, hey, pay attention over here, because these themes are going to be prominent for you in over the next couple of months, right? And they may cause a little bit of tension and a little bit of friction that needs to be worked through. And so forewarned is forearmed, as they say, right? There can also be some real kind of like depth and you know, that sense of sort of like beauty. Like we talked all in the introduction about this idea of reverence for life and the sacredness of life and the beauty and the natural cycles and all of that. So please listen to the intro. But for you, this is all triggering your 10th house, which is your public house, which has to do with your career, which has to do with the legacy you wish to leave, your worldly ambitions, you know, your relationship to authority and authority figures and your own authority. And so Venus moving in there can bring things like, it can trigger issues around like money in your career. It can relationships and career. There could be like an intense, it is in Scorpio, an intense sort of attraction, perhaps that is either quite public or has to do with somebody who is in public life or somebody related to your career in some way, shape, or form. This could have to do with when we're talking about the concept of legacy and Venus, like I see this like relationship legacy in a sense, you know, like what's the relationship legacy you want to leave behind? This could be work that you're doing that's related to your career somehow, or related to public life that has, you know, that can feel quite intense, but that can revolve around Venusian issues of beauty, of women, of of resources, even of, you know, those kinds of themes. And so, again, as Venus enters Scorpio, notice the shift from how, you know, things were feeling when Venus was at home in Libra, and how things may start to feel a little bit more intense, right? As the Scorpio energies are triggered, and therefore the Taurus and Aquarius, the planets there are also being triggered. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Aquarius, and I'm going to move to Capricorn next, where we have Scorpio sits in your 11th house. So Venus is going to enter that 11th house, leading the charge, and then will be followed by eventually, you know, other planets, the Sun, Mercury, Mars. But so every year around Scorpio season, the 11th house gets triggered for you. But, and so there tends to be a little bit more attention on those things, or activity around those things, right? A little bit more like that area of life pulls focus for you. But because we've got the Saturn-Uranus square, that's the backdrop of this year. We have Jupiter in Aquarius now too, along with Saturn. This is triggering this energy. And so there can feel like it can feel quite dynamic, like a very dynamic time, or a time of tension and friction that needs to be acted on or worked through, right? So for you, this is focused on your 11th house of friends, the group, organizations, clubs, associations, you know, friendship groups, networks, your supporters and allies, right? These are all 11th house themes, your vision for the future. So it can be, here we can have things like spending some money in conjunction with these things, with friends, somehow, or relationships with friends or female friends. This can have to do with, like, I think of like some kind of like a group that you might be involved in that could have to do with women, and it may be an online network, but it may be like, we're talking about like depth here, you know. We're not talking about like some group you're involved in that's like I don't know, like you know, we're not necessarily, I'm always hesitant to offend people, so things come into my mind and then I bite my tongue. Sometimes, not always, but so like when I'm saying like depth, like it could be like, I don't know, it could be like some kind of a moon circle or something mystical or magical, you know, that has a bit of an occult flavor, right? Occult just means hidden knowledge, by the way, or something that we may think of as a little bit more taboo, even. That, you know, you may be interacting with a group on that level in some way around this time. There could be, yeah, something going on with like female friends, or friends in money, or friends in beauty and aesthetic, or you know, I want to remind you of, in the introduction, we talked about this whole concept of like the sacredness of life and the natural cycles of things, and you know, that sort of idea. So please listen to the introduction. There could be something going on in terms of friends or the wider group, that brings in these deeper themes, right? There could be like some intense conversations or relating around issues of friends and groups and that kind of thing. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Capricorn. And I'm hoping that gives you, you know, enough to go on. As always, listen to the introduction, or you're going to miss a lot of the sort of meat and potatoes, shall we say. of the whole thing. And I'm going to move on. I'm losing my voice at this point. So much for keeping it short. Don't know why I ever say that. But I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now. And you're last but not least in this instant, Sag. Didn't forget you this time. So we've got, you have Scorpio in your 12th house, right? So every year at this time, when planets gradually start to move into Scorpio, your 12th house is triggered. Now, so that's nothing new in and of itself. However, because we have this backdrop of the Saturn-Uranus square, and we've got Jupiter in Aquarius there too, right? So Uranus is in Taurus, a fixed sign. Saturn and Aquarius are in, Saturn and Jupiter are in Aquarius, a fixed sign. These are signs that are in tension to Scorpio. So they're making these tense angles like we talked about. And the Saturn-Uranus square is, you know, the defining theme of this year. And so this is triggering that energy. So as I was saying earlier, like forewarned is forearmed, as they say, right? So expect that things in this area of life can get a little intense over the next couple of months. And as Venus moves in there on Friday and the moon is there over the weekend as well, we can really get a heads up about what is this kind of, where's this leading, right? So for you, that could be in the 12th house. Well, let's just, what does the 12th house signify? The 12th house signifies things like what goes on behind closed doors, literally and metaphorically, right? So the subconscious, our dream life, our spiritual life, how we spend time in solitude and isolation, for better or worse, our self-sabotaging sort of unconscious behaviors, if you will, our mental and spiritual health, places that are literally away from the world, right? I often mention things like hospitals, any kind of healthcare facility, rehab facility, treatment centers, prisons, spiritual retreat centers, like all of these things. Our 12th house. 12th house is like closure, endings, losses. It is, excuse me. It's the things that go on outside of the daily grind that are kind of opposite the daily grind, right? Because that's the 6th house. And so these are the themes that are being triggered. And Venus moving in there can be things like, you know, spending some resources, some money, even some time and energy on dealing with maybe some self-sabotaging behaviors, on dealing with maybe some mental health issues. This can be, this could be like spending money on a vacation just as easily, Venus in the 12th house. This could be secret romantic relationships, Venus in the 12th house, in Scorpio. Like that could feel quite intense even. This could be some intensity around your spiritual life, even as it relates maybe to money, as it relates to beauty, as it relates to the feminine in some way. And I know to some people, when I'm like rattling off things like this, some people might be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That sounds weird. But to other people, it may resonate, right? So I also think the 12th house is a really, it's one of those places where, you know, I was talking in the introduction about this whole notion of like Scorpio being connected to the death and rebirth cycle, right? And in the northern hemisphere, we have fall coming on where the leaves come off the trees and die and feed the earth, and so that ending of the cycle, so to speak. And so which is also the beginning of the new cycle, right? And so I think when we've got a lot of activity going on in the 12th house, a good use of that energy is really contemplating the beauty in endings potentially, you know, and how that brings ultimately about new beginnings, um, you know, in some way, and like just kind of bringing in those themes I was talking about in the introduction. So I think it would be really good for you to listen to that if you haven't yet. Spending some money on a spiritual retreat, maybe a women's retreat, maybe a vacation with female friends, you know, that you have like a sort of a bit of an intense dynamic with, or you're interested in maybe things that are a little taboo even in Scorpio, right? So these are, that is not an exhaustive list. It never is. Part of the reason these videos are so long is because I could just keep going and going and going about every different possibility, but that's unrealistic. And so I'm going to leave it there as I'm losing my voice, Sagittarius. I hope you found that somewhat helpful. And thanks everybody for being here. Please remember to subscribe and like the video if you found it helpful, and leave me a comment, okay? So take good care, and I will catch you next week. And let's hope this works this time. Bye for now. Nope, doesn't want to work. I don't know why. So